Hello, everyone. Welcome to the ShElite showcase inside the mind of everything. This is just a combination of all the shows this week. In honor of the PWI 500 coming out this past week, I thought, why not get an inside look into the process, into the committee, into everything. So joining me, the lovely Kristen Ashly. How are you?
I'm great. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Oh, of course. I mean, listen, I work with Warren all the time. He's
Yeah.
okay, but I need to work with the first lady here.
Right. That's right. Yeah.
This is where the magic is. You're the brains
Yeah.
behind it.
Yes. Sure. Yes. I'm definitely the smart one. Yeah, totally.
Hey now, listen. We even rescheduled this because you had an exam. So yes, you are the smart one.
True. True. An anatomy exam that I failed, but true. Yes.
Hey, I've never taken anatomy, so I probably would have failed too. More props
It's
to
hard.
you.
Thanks.
No problem. So the official list came out what day exactly? Because I can't even remember.
So a week ago. Last Wednesday.
Last Wednesday. Okay.
Yeah. Hmm.
So how did you become a part of the committee to pick these 500 wrestlers? Because I guarantee it's not just like, hey, random person here, be on committee.
Yeah. Yeah, no. And about what was it, 2020? Yeah, 2020. It was like July, I think. So it was over 2 years ago. I was having one of those crises that I think that we all have as creators, like, should I even continue doing this?
Mm-hmm.
And and I had like seen a PWI tweet about like upcoming issues, and I thought, you know what? Why not like one last ditch effort? And I had sent out a tweet to PWI like, hey, if you need help with that women's issue, you just let me know. And immediately Kevin, who had just picked up editor in chief role over there, had DM'd me and he said, we've been following your work for a while, and we'd love to have you come on and help. And the thing with PWI and Kevin is that he really likes to recruit people. Like, that's his thing.
Mm-hmm.
And typically we all have like a niche. I wouldn't call it a specialty because I don't think like I'm an expert in women's wrestling, but we all have like something that we are particularly good in. And
Yeah.
so for me it was women's wrestling, and then from there I just kept pitching ideas and he would pitch ideas for me, and then eventually the next year he was like, do you want to sit on the 500 committee, because we need somebody to really make sure that the women are being covered. So that's sort of my main role. I mean, I also I mean, I don't like shut up when the men are being ranked like that, that's horrible. But my main duty there is to make sure that women are being ranked properly. I've like argued for women to be ranked higher, that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, it's just been sort of like a ball rolling. Kevin's really great about just throwing you wherever he needs you. So
That's awesome. I know I've like seen the interactions between the majority of people on the PWI on Twitter, and you all just seem
yes.
like a cool group of people just like joking with each other. And
Yeah.
I know Warren's talked about how he was on a panel before, like last year, and some stuff that
Yeah.
happened, and trying to like you guys, there's a lot of arguing about like the top five and who should be number one. I believe it was for the women's list,
Yeah, he's only been on the women's list, right? Yeah. Yeah,
which
I think it's
yeah,
yeah. Yeah. I wouldn't say, I mean, he would probably say arguing. I would say like friendly debating. Like,
friendly
we're
debating.
all extreme professionals. Like, not one of us is like, I would say, I mean, I probably do with the women's list. I don't think anyone's like dominating the conversation more than other people. I think
Mm-hmm.
we all are pretty professional, but it's definitely like staff wise one of the best staffs that I've had like very little problem, like no problems with, frankly. Like, it's a really great group there.
Well, I mean, that's good. Nobody wants to have
Yeah.
issues with the people they work with, especially in
No,
like
it's
this
really
kind of
fun.
setting. No,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
I've been there. Not fun.
Yeah, well, and nobody is gonna agree with everyone. Like,
Exactly.
that's the thing. But as long as you can keep it professional, that's all that matters.
Yeah, like you can keep it professional, especially in that kind of setting where like you guys are creating this list that goes out to everybody, and
Right.
obviously people aren't going to be happy with the list, or wrestlers aren't happy where they're ranked, their fans aren't happy where they're ranked. um
Yeah.
so how do you, like, you personally, because again you are a part of this committee who creates the list,
Yeah.
how do you personally deal with the quote unquote backlash from the PWI coming out, like when they first come out and then Twitter bursts into flames?
Yeah. I had a feeling this 500 was going to be a shit stir, so to speak. Like I had a feeling that it was gonna be, and I even warned Kevin, I'll say, like, prepare yourself, man. And he was like, it happens every year, which it does. That's the thing. Like this year seemed particularly awful, but there have been, every single year, like there's issues because you're never gonna make every single person happy, nor should you try to. Like that's not the point. The point is, for me at least, going in is to remember, like, we're not gonna please every single person, and this isn't really for the fans. I know they don't want to hear that, but it's really not for the fans.
Mm-hmm.
You can say it's for the readers, but it's really for the wrestlers. It's to, at least for me, I can say personally, it's to recognize the wrestlers and how well they're doing and really appreciate and celebrate what they've done inside and outside the ring. And I think it's important for people to remember, that I try to remember, is that this one ranking is not indicative of their whole entire career. It's a snapshot in time. It's made by like maybe a dozen people, if you count all the people that Kevin sort of asks for opinions from. Um, and it doesn't always recognize things like for instance, Eddie Kingston, right? Like Eddie Kingston on paper maybe didn't have the best year,
Mm-hmm.
but Eddie Kingston is very important to the fan base. And those things maybe are not as measurable. So, like, people always get really in an uproar about lists. I don't know if you ever heard Brian Regan. He's this comedian, and he he was talking about a list of the best sandwiches, but he had said that he had created this list, and that when you create lists, people give you power, and that's true. Like, we get so much power placed in our laps just for creating a ranking, and it's like every year it changes. Nothing is ever the same.
Mm-hmm.
So I personally, this year, I thought I'm going to take a more positive approach instead of getting involved in the discourse, because it's really easy to do that.
Mm-hmm.
um and I said, look, there's 6 women who ranked for the first time on the 500. There's 6 women who ranked for the first time on any PWI list. Let's give them some shine instead of like arguing who should be at number 5. I think that's like, first off, it's already done. Like, I know the Mox thing was a huge uproar. And I thought it was kind of funny because people were really martyring for Mox, when I know for a fact Mox never goes on social media. He would rather not.
Mm-hmm.
He's got other things to worry about. And I will say that the wrestlers who complain are usually complaining about their bios being wrong more so than their ranking.
Okay.
So, like, and that's easy to do because things on the internet are always like, they're not always perfect.
Mm-hmm.
But typically when I see a wrestler, at least, it's because, well, okay, like for instance, Max, their ranking said they didn't list last year when they did. So just little things like that, right? Rather than like, oh, I didn't list where I wanted to. That's typically not the case with wrestlers. It's usually just fans. But
Yeah.
so, to wrap that all up, basically it's just me remembering that it's not for the fans, because you're never going to please all the fans. It's just for the wrestlers. And I will say too that we don't always agree on everything. I didn't agree with some spaces in the top 10.
Mm-hmm.
It's a ranking by committee, so it's not always unanimous. Sometimes I'll, like, for the women's 150, for instance, I'll say we argued between the 1 and 2 spot for over an hour, and even afterwards there was emails and other meetings had for the people who couldn't make the committee meetings. Um, so sometimes it really matters. I mean, it always really matters to us, but we don't take it lightly, and sometimes we don't all agree, and that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, you said what about like 12-ish people on the committee, give or take?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember how. I think it's 8 that were actually in the meeting, but sometimes Kevin, for people who couldn't make the meeting or to keep the meeting not so big,
Mm-hmm.
he'll like, people who maybe know Japanese wrestling better or something like that. He'll sort of reach out, especially Mexican wrestling. He'll reach out to people and go like, what do you think about these people where they're at?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not, and those people are included in the magazine as being reached out to. So
Okay. Yeah, because once you get at least, like, if you get like more than two people who have kind of different mindsets, or they
yeah,
think they're right or you think you're right, if you get multiple people who are like that in a room
yeah,
or in a meeting, obviously people are going to butt heads and
right.
things aren't going to be maybe not the way you want them, but too many cooks in the kitchen. I feel like that's basically like what that seems like. Everyone has their opinion.
Yeah,
Everyone thinks theirs might be
right.
right, and then you kind of have to. It's a little give and take.
Right. And that's what I'm gonna give his line away. That's what Warren had said when we were talking about this, was he had said, we know which battles to fight, right? Like, I don't happen to care who might be in number 20,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm gonna care who's number one, or I'm gonna care who's number two. And like knowing like, okay, I need to save my energy for this certain person or this certain spot that I'm really gonna argue for. Like
Mm-hmm.
the women's committee, for instance, I will come in with my top 20 already picked out for myself.
Okay.
And then those are the people that I know, like, I want to argue for that top 20. Those are my top 20 people. And I will say, without opening myself up to some criticism, the top 5 was my top 5. So, like, you have to pick and choose your battle.
Okay.
And, the 500 is a little different because you maybe get through the top 100, and then you might have a second meeting, and then the rest of it is like sometimes it's mostly Kevin, sometimes it's email chains, whatever, email threads. And then the women's 150, we typically do the whole thing in one sitting, but like
Okay.
today we were even swapping out people because you miss things. I mean, it's like not perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was doing a write-up for the issue, for the women's issue, and I noticed somebody who wasn't on the list, and I went, but they had a really good year. Like, and then I contact Kevin, and then we talk about it. So even after, like, it's not like the meeting closes in an hour and we're just done. Like the hour, I mean, it takes hours. I think it's usually like 4 hours for a women's meeting, and then after that, it's not done. So I know a lot of people get this image in their heads that we just all like sit down and just and we easily rank things and then that's it. But it's not. Like we do try to take it very seriously, but things still do fall through the cracks, and that's just life, really.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So I think I know like a little bit about the requirements that you guys
Yeah.
have for specifically the 500. Do you want to like run down like how you guys kind of decide who gets on the list and like the quote unquote
Yeah.
requirements, I guess?
Yeah. Um, Sometimes like the 500 we try to get through as much of the list as we can. So sometimes there's a little bit of research that we do and talk about before we even get into the meeting.
Okay.
So typically when you get into a meeting, you kind of know who's going to be like the top 3. Like it's pretty obvious at that point, like, okay, Roman Reigns had a killer year. Like he has held this title forever and nobody can stop him. He's got a lot of influence in WWE. He's got a lot of influence around the world. Like he's
Mm-hmm.
now going part-time because he's so influential. So, going in, there were some other thoughts about who should be number 1, but really we all went in there going Roman Reigns number 1. So we all do our own little research. Um Last year it was a little different. We had to argue between two people, debate. But, and then from there, so we start from number 1 and we go down,
Okay.
because typically the top is a lot easier than the bottom. The bottom, you're kind of getting in the weeds with things, especially with the 500. My God, sometimes you're like, you're talking about wrestlers that very few people know about or that aren't seen on streaming services very much. So you're
Mm-hmm.
getting at the weeds of things, and it's more about representation than anything else. Um, so the top, you start from top down, and then it's like, okay, so who had titles? I mean, that's also the thing. It's like, especially with the women's list, you go, who had titles in the big promotions, and you go down from there. Now, there are going to be people like AC Mack who had a title, who made number 25, but wasn't a title that was like a huge promotion. But, you know, we look at things like, okay, he's the first openly gay world title holder. So the
Mm-hmm.
influence that he has on wrestling as a whole, um, obviously it's a kayfabe list, so there's things like push, which is why I mean that's wrestling.
Yeah.
It's why people have titles, right? Like that's the whole point. Strength of competition, and here's where it can get kind of dicey. Is it's all opinionated, right? So like
Mm-hmm.
we could say, okay, well, Mox fought this person. Is this person really considered a strong competitor? And at some point you can break down things in stats, but it's going to take you weeks to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to kind of go with your gut feeling. There's like actual measurable stuff like matches, win records, titles held, the length of titles, the number of titles. You know, when you think of like um, Kenny Omega, for instance, he held like every single title for a while. So you think of things like that. That's kind of obvious, you know, like that person gets towards the top of the list. So
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it all depends. I would say the women's list is a little bit harder in that manner because, well, frankly, women get less matches, they get less titles,
Mm-hmm.
all that stuff. And so eventually you have to go, so who's had the most influence? And it's, I mean, it is a debate, but at some point you get to like, okay, so now you're at number 30 and maybe it's a little bit easier to go down the list because it's not such a contention, you know?
Oh yeah. I mean, and all of that makes so much sense. Like, Roman literally hasn't lost in so long. Is that man's
Right,
been holding titles forever? It seems like. He's
right.
reaching triple digits soon. Like, he's never gonna be stopped at this
Yeah,
point. So that makes
right.
sense that you all came in with that, being like, guys,
Yeah,
come on,
right. And
we
yeah, and activity, right. Activity plays a part too. Like Brock didn't rank because he only fought in a couple matches. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, they have to be they have to be active. And it's like 10 matches for the entire year or 6 in 6 separate months. So as long as they've been around in the year, and again, it doesn't mean that they're not good wrestlers. It just means maybe that year wasn't their year to shine, essentially.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
the what is your guys' time frame for picking people?
Oh, so it depends on the issue. And I mean, a lot of this is like, so for instance, the women's 150 starts, sep- no, starts September 1st? No, October 1st. See, I'm having trouble. And ends on the 15th of this month. So it's about a year. It typically is a year.
Mm-hmm.
This year it's like 2 weeks shorter because the publication schedule, just because of that.
Yeah.
And it's easier than trying to make it like start at the 16th. It's difficult that way. And typically 2 weeks doesn't like make or break anybody. It's like either they're in or they're out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, so then the 500 was like July 1st to June 30th, I want to say. So it's usually a year. We would love to have it just be January 1st to the end of the year, but that's not really how the publication works. And we want to get it as close, the end date as close to when it goes to printer as possible
Mm-hmm.
because of recency bias, like what we saw with the whole Moxley debate, was people were thinking of like the recent successes. So we want to get it as close to it as we can. So when it comes out on the 27th, it has already it's only been ended for a month as opposed to like the beginning of the year kind of thing.
That makes sense. And I did see a lot of discourse about that. People were saying this person's had one of the best months, talking about like this, like August or whatever, and then
Right.
they don't realize that it is only July to June.
Yeah.
But for next year, like that could start
Right.
playing
Yeah.
into their
It's hard.
ranking. Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard when you do the write-ups. It's hard when you are on the committees because you have to remember like, okay, so like when I'm doing the write-ups for the entries, for instance. I'm like, so this happened outside. Like, you really have to think about it. And yeah, it's tough because the fans see what's happened over the last few weeks and they think, like, I don't know, I guess a lot of people don't realize like print takes a while to come
Mm-hmm.
out. It's not like the list is dropped like we made it yesterday, print takes a while. There's a lot of editing and a lot of stuff to go through. So yeah, and I mean, I don't blame fans. Like, they don't know. We do try to like really really push the dates, but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, people they don't pay attention. They don't want to read.
Yeah, nor do they see it. I think a lot of people
That would take
forget
some like
that it's an.
searching.
I think
Yeah.
people forget it's an actual magazine too.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing too. It's like a lot of the older, like, I don't say older, but the ones who've read the magazine for a while, they get
Mm-hmm.
where it's coming from. But if you're just like a fan who maybe doesn't buy the magazine, or you just look at the rankings, because there are places that will literally put out the entire ranking on us, and they just look at those websites, and you're like, okay, well, then yeah, you're gonna get upset about it because you don't realize all the work that goes into it. Yeah,
For sure. Now,
yeah,
for the entries for people, because I always see that like you have the person's name, their ranking, and then like a little like bio. What do
yeah.
you decide, or I guess what do you kind of figure out what goes in the bio? Because it's only a paragraph for each person, and some people have like a lot
Yeah.
of accomplishments. So what do you put in the bio usually?
Yeah, it's like 50 words literally. So
Okay.
50 to 60. Yeah. So yeah, we go their name. The numbers you see in the brackets are experience and their last year's ranking. It's funny because Trisha Dora last year, she was the highest ranking woman on the 500. And or no, is it the 500? One of the lists. And it listed like 128 or something. She goes, "Oh, that's not my weight." And it's like, it's not the weight. It's your last year's ranking, which I think we should be more clear about too. And then we pick a fun fact. So like the finisher, their birthplace, their Achilles heel, side hustle, that
Okay.
kind of thing. Just whatever we want for that, whatever is fun. And then typically what we try to do is we write in there why they placed where they placed. So, if somebody has gone down, you still want to list all their accomplishments because that's why they're on the ranking to begin with. But like, if let's say, I don't know, I don't want to give anything away, but let's say that like uh Kenny Omega, for instance, is lower than he was last year, it's because he missed some time, or
Yeah.
like we put that in the bio, like so and so had an injury for 6 months of the evaluation. That way people get an understanding of why they're ranked where they are. Because
Mm-hmm.
if we just listed all of the accolades everybody had, well, they should all be number one. Or if we just listed like all the mean things, well, that wouldn't be nice either because they're on the ranking.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to defend their spot is essentially what we're trying to do. So a lot of times you'll see like so and so defeated these people, and that's because those people are either above or below them, and we want to kind of justify why they're at that spot.
No, that makes perfect sense. I was always curious because like I've seen like different things that like obviously like their number, everything like that. But I was always curious about like what you guys choose to put in there. The fun facts is cool. Like I think that's awesome. Just like a random fact, like that's cool to me.
Yeah,
It's like um superlatives from high school. That's kind of what it like reminds me
yeah,
of.
yeah. They're like, yeah, exactly. And that's where sometimes we get things wrong. I think it was Jocelyn Navarro. I think it was her where they got their finisher wrong. So sometimes like
Okay.
I really have to look. Like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes it's like, okay, yes, I know that this person's Achilles heel is this, or yeah, we know that Carmela's side hustle is her wine company or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But like sometimes you really have to go and look. Like there's been times where I go on YouTube and I look up their finishers, or I watch tape, or I even go to all of their social media,
Yeah.
because sometimes it's very obvious on there. Like their birthplace will be completely different on Cage Match compared to where they're actually born, and there's a difference between like a build hometown to where they're actually like from, and you have to word that properly. And so we always suggest to people that they send in their own bios, so that we don't get anything wrong. It doesn't mean that you will necessarily rank, and it doesn't mean that you won't rank if you don't send it in. But that way we don't get things wrong. And we put that out a few months ahead of time. We don't always get a really good response because that's just life. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we do try to suggest they send in their own info. The internet's not always trustworthy.
Very true.
Right.
You brought up the like their birth like hometown versus like the build hometown. If you can see the little plushie I have, Adam Cole. It's the first person I thought
Yeah.
of because he's billed from Panama, but he's from freaking Pennsylvania,
Right.
and I'm like, you're not slick, sir. I know you're from
Right.
the other side of the state I'm in currently. Like, you're not slick. I know.
Yeah.
So,
Or it's like, right. Or Britt's a good one, I think, because she's from a town who's like an hour away from Pittsburgh.
mm-hmm.
So she's not really from Pittsburgh, but they'll pick the metro because
Yep.
that's what's recognizable.
Yep.
Like when you think of Martina and Mercedes Martinez, she lives in Florida, but she's from Connecticut, but she's
Okay.
very like, she pushes her nationality very well. So it's all like, you just have to be careful about how you word it. Like
Mm-hmm.
build from is totally different. And it's very easy to find a build from, but it's not always like I use a lot of stuff from Cage Match and that's been wrong a lot. So you just have to be careful.
I think it was there's somebody else who always like changes where they're billed from. Maybe it was Dolph Ziggler. I
Yeah.
feel like he was like from like billed from Hollywood, Florida, or something for a while, but like he's from
Yeah.
Cleveland. I could be him. I could be very wrong, but I feel like it was somebody like mid card, but like very popular who always or like Tyler Breeze when he was in NXT. He was always like billed from
Right.
whatever home he was staying in for the week kind of thing, which I thought was cool because
Yeah.
it made sense for his gimmick. But I think a lot of people forget that there's people who just have a random or made up place. Orange Cassidy's from wherever. Like.
Right. Or like Red Velvet from Your Mama's Kitchen. I mean, those things are, yeah, and that's why I try not to use, like I don't try to use the weight or the height.
Mm-hmm.
If I do, I say build height because people's real heights are not always, they're not generally not the same. They want you to think their wrestlers are larger than life. Um, so I try to use things like where they're trained by, who are they trained
Okay.
by, they're got a signature move, a faction or affiliation that they're with, that kind
Okay.
of thing. Or sometimes when they're announcing people, they'll say like Orange Cassidy nowhere, or wherever, and so sometimes they'll say really fun things like Sonico, for instance, recently was like, oh, he's a member of the Big Starks brand. So like paying attention to those things because that's stuff that you can use for these fun facts, like
Yeah.
things that they just list off. And like they don't have to be accurate. Like they're a list off while they're coming out, as long as you word it as such so that people don't think it's a real, like obviously Orange Cassidy has a birth town, like that's a thing. So but as long as people realize that it is kayfabe, then they're fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I feel like for a fun fact for Kenny because he always mentions North Carolina in some way, shape, or form. Like
Yeah.
he's
Yeah. His
from
5 minute
Canada.
intro.
Like.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
So,
That's a perfect example of somebody who has like a really long intro, and you should pay attention because those are things that as writers you can use for later on. Yeah.
that's smart.
Yeah.
So, uh, I saw a lot of conversations when the list dropped, or at least the top 10 dropped.
Yeah.
People were like, where are the women on the list? Now,
Yeah.
obviously, I know that there is the separate women's 150.
Right.
Um, so, how is it? I'm trying to figure out how I want to word this. To get the women on the 500, because there is obviously more male wrestlers than there are female
Yeah.
wrestlers. Um,
Yes.
like, what is the, I guess, like the process or the fight even to get women on the 500?
Yeah, so the fight isn't typically too hard. It's just the fact that they have to meet the criteria. So historically, since the was in 1991, the list has always been heavyweight or open weight, open division titles, meaning men and women they're genderless, so anybody can fight for those titles.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the titles that are considered. Those are the divisions that are considered. Now, that means people like Sasha Banks, the WWE, AEW, the big ones are not going to rank
Mm-hmm.
because they're not allowed to fight anymore, at least the same titles as the men. So I mean, the easiest way to say it is intergender, but it also means genderless.
Mm-hmm.
So like you have people like Max who fights whenever, whoever, or Masha Slamovich, whomever, wherever. Jordan Grace was, I think, the only one from a big promotion at Impact because she has fought for traditionally men's titles. So X Division, the World Tag titles, everything but the actual world title at Impact. She's fought for everything.
Mm-hmm.
So she counts because of the criteria. Now, we get the question then, why don't you combine them? And that's a really good question because in on paper it's like, okay, then it's equal. But then on paper, you'll get very little women that way because women's wrestling is not it's not treated as equal in the real world. There's
Mm-hmm.
less matches, there's less titles, there's less time, there's less female wrestlers, the rosters are smaller. um and then in turn means that their strength of competition is less because they're having to fight the same women over and over again.
Yeah.
You see AEW, their roster is 100 men compared to like 20, 23, 24 women.
Yep.
So, and half of them are gone. So they're
Yup.
fighting the same women over again. And that's a negative for strength of competition. They're just fighting the same people. So if you combine these lists, you're just gonna get a lot of like the big women, like the Becky Lynches and the Biancas and the Thunder Rosas, but you're not gonna get like any indie women. They're
Mm-hmm.
gonna be completely erased from the lists,
Yeah.
unless they're like a Jordan Grace,
Yeah.
right? They're gonna be completely erased. Um, and so that's not fair. That doesn't even the playing field at all,
Yeah.
at all. So we've tried to come up with. I mean, trust us when we say that we are working on it. There are lots of ideas being thrown around. Somebody had said on Twitter, what about a like a big three or like a big companies list would actually have contracts versus an indie list? Yes, but then the problem is like Moxley goes and he works at GCW. How do you count that, right?
Yeah.
So there's really no nice way to do it, and that's why we've kept the 100. We've just increased it
Yeah.
because in our mind women already don't get enough. They don't get enough of anything, certainly recognition.
Mm-hmm.
And they deserve it, and so that's sort of our way. And then two, with the 150, the whole issue is about women. There might be a column or two that doesn't have a woman's focus, but then the whole issue is about women, and we're having at least one issue a year that's just totally about women, and that's super important to us too because we need that representation. It's very important. So there's no easy answer. I mean, there really isn't,
Yeah.
because yeah, we could combine it, but then there's just not going to be enough women. It's still going to be the same percentage, because you're just going to have way more men. But yeah, it's hard. It's
Mm-hmm.
hard, and it's like every year that this is my third year now. We're going to get that question continuously,
Yep.
and I'll say the same thing. And I want to say to people, like, shout to the promoters, shout to them. They don't always listen.
Yeah.
We've seen that over and over again
Yeah.
from all kinds of promotions, but shout to them. Show up for the women, buy their merch, watch those matches, show up for all that stuff, because that's how unfortunately they're gonna base their worth a
Yeah.
lot of times. It's the ratings and the money. So show up for them, demand change. There has been some change this year, which is good. But we'll see. I think a lot of people have this Triple H, like, yeah, Triple H, and then they also have like, okay, so we've got Madison Rain and we've got all these other people behind the scenes now for AEW. And I think a lot of people have this hope for the women, and that's
Mm-hmm.
great, but we'll still see. Like, I think we need to keep showing up and not just resting our laurels at all about it.
No.
That's how we make a combined list. Yeah.
I, yeah, I mean, that's also why I wanted to ask that question, because I was very intrigued. I feel like I saw you mention something along those lines in a tweet. I don't know if you
Yeah,
were responding to somebody or just tweeting about it. So that's why I
yeah,
wanted to like dive deeper into it because it does make a lot of sense. The women traditionally do not get as much time as men on
right.
at least WWE and AEW. So it makes a lot of sense as to why
Yeah,
those. And I didn't know about it was like the world or the heavyweights and the open weights. Like I
the
didn't know that at
open.
all.
Yeah, yeah. And the thing is, we could just say titles,
Mm-hmm.
but that puts all titles on the same. And here's the thing too, like we could do that. We could combine them, but then you think like, I don't know, Sasha Banks and I don't know, Seth Rollins, for instance. Let's just pretend that they had exactly the same year.
Mm-hmm.
How do you then rank one above the other? And
Yeah.
are you going to let your own biases in, right? Like at some point, it comes down to gender or lack of gender. And so, what then? Like, it's not as easy as like going, okay, so we can rank Alley Catch here because Alley Catch has fought against these men.
Yeah.
It's easier to rank that. You can't do that with Sasha Banks. She's never fought Seth Rollins. How do you do this then? So
Mm-hmm.
at some point you have to make those decisions, especially WWE because they don't let their people go out and work indie dates.
Yeah.
And it's hard. Like all things considered, like what do you do then? So there's a lot of things to consider. We have to think about the committee itself and how much time we're putting into it.
Yeah.
Like sometimes it's just really difficult to do that. And so it's there's no easy answer. And yeah, I was replying to somebody who had a very genuine concern. I take all the concerns very seriously.
Yeah.
It's just there's no right answer. We could get rid of the criteria altogether, but the women aren't being treated equally, so
Exactly.
they're not gonna line up. Sure, your Utamis and your Biancas and stuff are gonna rank high, but then you get down to the mid card and then what? Like they're not going to be as high. So
No,
it's difficult.
it makes a lot
Yeah.
of sense. And I have been pushing for WWE to bring back this intergender shit, and they're not. And I'm fighting somebody. I just want Rhea
Yeah.
Ripley to fight everybody. Like it's all I want. It's
Yeah.
literally all I want.
Right. I think there's always like inklings, like for instance, Rhea Ripley, because she is formidable. Like the
Yeah.
same thing with Charlotte Flair.
Yeah.
She's formidable. She can hold her own. Same thing with Bianca. And now you see like Ty is holding the AA mixed tag titles, right?
Yeah.
So AAA. So she's like you see her fighting men occasionally. So there are some like looser restrictions, and maybe if they got off of TBS and TNT, it would be a little looser.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there is a lot to do with what these cable companies are going to allow on their screens.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's still true, but it was, I think, a few years ago. Mattel was basically telling WWE, yeah, no, it's not happening. But you
Right.
have Candice LeRae in your company, and that's what she did.
Yes.
So,
Yes, and
like,
it's such old standards
yep,
because hello, there was China, there was Medusa, there was all kinds of women who could hold their Aja Kong. There was so many
so
women who
many.
could hold their own. Um, I'm glad that the aggression era is in the aggression era. We don't need that back. But I think there is something to be said about these old standards that like kids are gonna grow up seeing adults fight, and maybe that's not the best message. I get that. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think it's correct, but I'm also an adult male. I mean, adult male, adult female. I am tired. I am not an adult male, by the way. Adult female. I'm an adult female, and um, I know those nuances.
Mm-hmm.
A 6-year-old girl may not know those nuances, right? So
Yeah.
I can understand why a toy company would say we don't want that, and it will hurt their sales because there are people out there, adults, who say oh they shouldn't do it, so it will hurt sales, and it sucks. But I do think that WWE is one of those few companies that can maybe get away with it because they have such great women in their division that it's okay. I mean, I would rather them all be able to fight each other, but I think at the end of the day, like I'm okay with seeing Bianca and Becky. I'm
Yeah.
fine with it.
Yeah, and like we've gotten like tastes of it here and there, like Baron Corbin hitting the end of days on Becky.
Right.
Women like hitting
Right.
like Canadian destroyers on men, like AEW does it every once in a while. So like there are definitely instances in
Yeah.
and inklings recently the past like few years. Yeah, I can't talk either. So and I just like I loved seeing like Trish and The Rock and like Lita and like Triple H and like everyone kind of like fighting each other. That was cool for me because like
Yeah.
I liked seeing that, but and like I understand why it is the way it is now.
Yeah.
Doesn't
Yeah.
mean I have to fully like it, but I
Yeah.
understand.
Yeah. The thing is with the aggression is we got rid of like Lita stripping down to her underwear, but
Yeah,
like then we also got rid of some of the equality issues too, where like fighting each other. And
yeah,
maybe we'll get there one day. Who knows?
one day.
But I think that's what makes the indie so great is like, look, these women, and it's, I mean, it's wrestling. It's, if you can't understand that this stuff, I mean, I remember the first time I saw wrestlers, it was two women, but two women, I was on like a reporting thing. Two women practice, like air practicing their moves together. I was like, this is really behind the curtain. Like, don't take pictures of this. Like, it's fake, guys. But I understand that they're marketing specifically to kids.
Yeah,
AW is not so much. I mean, they are, but they're not. So they, you see a little more. And I think when you see it in little bits and pieces, it's affirmations that that company understands that these women could fight the men.
mm-hmm.
Very, like Jade could destroy the whole men's, like just by strength, right?
Yeah,
Like maybe not by, but strength. She could fight a lot, especially the mid carders. But you know, like there are other things to think about in those instances. Yeah.
no, 100%. Jesus, it's a day. I'm telling you.
I'm calling myself a male. You're doing whatever.
I
It's
just got a
just
lot
like
going on here. I don't know what's
you
going
got to
on.
cut that out of the thing. Like I am not a man.
I
It's so weird.
I can cut if you want me to, or I can leave
Oh
it
my
in and we
gosh.
can keep it as a
It's
joke.
whatever.
That's your call. Um, the women's 150. Let's talk about that for a minute here or two. Um,
Sure.
obviously it hasn't always been 150.
Yeah.
Now correct me if I'm wrong. I believe it was last year was the first year it was 150.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, what made you guys decide last year? All right, we have the 100, but like this year it needs to be 150. Was there like a specific instance, or was it just you guys decided? No, there's a lot more women who need recognition. They deserve to be on the list.
It's getting harder this year. It was still harder, and the list is supposed to be prestigious. Like we want it to be perceived as prestigious, so not everybody can rank. I mean, then
Mm-hmm.
it's like, what's the point? Um, it's supposed to be a snapshot of the best wrestlers of the year, and so yeah. But then there are people that are left off that were like, oh, we really want to be on the list. So last year, even with the whole, it was like the year before was the whole COVID shutdown with like the UK and Canada.
Yeah.
It was so hard, and we were like, look, I think it's time. Like it was what 2018, I think they finally, or 2018 they went from 50 to 100. And we're like, it's, there's so many more women, and not just that, but there's more visibility. The great thing about COVID is that it brought like streaming
Yeah.
to our households. So now we see women that maybe were in territories that we, like, I didn't know about Sandra Moon until a couple years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Like there are people that we didn't normally see. So now we've got a lot more women to rank, and it's getting hard. There's so many women who are so great. And so last year we literally just said, we want to fit more women. There's too many women being left off.
Mm-hmm.
This year there's still too many, in my opinion. I would like more women. It's not off the table that it won't be extended again. I would put money on it that it will be. I don't know how soon. I would say it would be 200 probably within the next 5 years, but do not quote me on it. I just think it's, if we're to keep the two lists, it's getting super hard. Because the thing is too is that the women who are on the 500 also have really great years for their women's work too. So
Yeah.
then they're also on this list. So it's just, it's hard. insanely hard. And I think like this year I was like, can we increase it again? And Kevin was like, we're already increasing the tag team list. Like, let's do one thing at a time. So eventually if it stays the women's list, we will. If we don't combine them somehow, we will. But it's just, I think at some point you realize that you're leaving off a lot of talent. I mean, if I think if that we cut the list that we have now at 100, I would be devastated. There are so many women from 100 to 150 who need to be on the list. And um it's weird because it's not like rosters are super growing in size, but I think the indie talent is really what's stepping up the game. So yeah, I mean, it's hard, and it's not like a strategic move in that way. It's just like in the moment, like with the tag team list being 100, it's like, how do we just rank 50? There's so many and there's trios, like how do we do this, so um it just gets harder and harder every year, man. There's just so many wrestlers.
I feel like there's like 18 new people I see who are like, yeah, I'm a wrestler. I'm like, where did you come from? Like, what happened? I blinked and there's like 25 new people like popping up on my Twitter feed being like, yeah, I've been a wrestler for 20 years. I wrestle here and there. I'm like, where the fuck did you come from?
What? Right. And that's what I mean is like the streaming service is sort of and the YouTube and all that, it all brings it all together for us. And then you think of like New Japan's got their Young Lions, and Stardom starts super early with the women. So we have all this influx of women and men in Japan. I think it's a good sign that we have so many new wrestlers because it means people are feeling safe out there, at least a little bit anyway. So, but yeah, I mean, I'm getting like, I'll get like when I do the list, when they drop, I tend to get friend requests from wrestlers or follows from wrestlers, and it's like, oh, I didn't really know about this person, but they're like on a promotion that I know, and it's hard to keep track of all of it, but that's why you have a committee.
Exactly, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So is how many people are on the women's committee?
So let's see, I think I can tell you. Warren, Kevin, myself, I don't know. I don't want to say their names. It's about 7 people. 7 people. Because 2 people couldn't make the meeting that night. But 7 people. But again, there's a lot of people that, like Walter Yeats, for instance, is very familiar with the Japanese territories. So he will throw in names. There are people that Kevin will ask for about Mexico because we are not always able to stream their stuff.
Yeah.
I'm okay on the luchadores, but there are times where I maybe don't know as much. But it's it's not just like the people in the room. There's typically all sorts of people that kind of lend names, and they'll be listed too. It just depends on what Kevin needs. Way more with the 500 than the women's 50 for sure.
Oh yeah, I mean, 500 is its own like freaking beast.
Yeah,
like, I couldn't even imagine.
I know, it's crazy.
So before we wrap this up, do you want to give me? You don't have to. I'm just kind of pushing the limit here. Do you want to tell me anything exciting, or maybe tell me someone in the top 10 for the women's 150?
I cannot. First off, I cannot reveal anybody in the list because I will be murdered. Kevin,
I tried.
He would send a sniper. Like there was an instance today where I thought maybe somebody was getting access to the list, and I was like, we were told to protect. They weren't, but we were told to protect this thing like a baby. And there have been instances in the past where it hasn't been protected like a baby, like the 500 and stuff. And like it's basically whoever's in the committee, that's who gets to see the whole list, and that's it. So usually we'll have people like the day before maybe get it, like Women's Wrestling Talk, for instance. They have me on, and so that they can do the research, they'll get it the night before, kind of thing. Don't go searching for answers from them, everybody. Don't do it. I will tell TK to keep it on the low. But I will say this is a landmark list for me. This is, like I said, the top 5 is the top 5 for me. I was like, I win. I was so excited. It's I'm really proud of this list as a whole. There's a lot of really cool placements. I'm very excited for this list, and like where I was really nervous about the 500, I'm super excited about this list. Like, it's really great. I can't wait.
Okay. Now, I know you can't tell me anyone on the list.
Yeah.
Can you tell me someone who just possibly missed the list?
I can't tell you that either.
Damn it. I tried.
I know.
I tried.
I know.
I was like, they're technically not on the list, but I mean that makes sense though.
If you like, I usually do like 4 interviews the day that it's released, because that's when people can actually get that information from me. And it's nice because then they don't need to necessarily go by the whole issue. We can just talk about the top 10 and that sort of thing. But Kevin will kill me. So
Kevin,
trust me, I really want to shout it to the world for the top 10, but I can't. But it's really good. Like, I promise here, like in a little over a month, that you're gonna be like, this is an amazing list. I would be very surprised if there are a lot of people pissed off. I'll be very surprised.
I was just
now I say that there probably will be, but I would be very surprised.
So what day is this list coming out?
So sometimes it will be like the 500 was a day early.
Yeah.
But right now it's October 27th. So typically issues are released on a Thursday. Okay. So October 27th, right before Halloween, it'll be a good time. Perfect. And I'm trying to set up some like interviews to do the release of the top 10, so people look out on that. But I promise, if people are disappointed, I'm gonna be very surprised. It's a really good list.
Well, listen, I'm very excited because I typically do my shows Thursday nights, so I just know that I'm gonna have some good content that day. Oh, yeah, and it's gonna be our spooky episode. Oh, I'm so excited now. Yes,
great. And I'll say this: there are spooky wrestlers on this list. Have that. So make sure that when you are reading the list, you look for the spooky ones, because that'll be the ones you want to highlight. Listen, there you go.
It's all right there. I have one spooky wrestler in mind, and she should. I'm not going to. She might be on the list. I would have to like look back at her year.
My thought is, if you are thinking of that person, like if you're thinking of one person right away, it's probably true. But don't say it out loud.
I will not. Mom's a word. Nobody will know. Well, Kristen, this was so much fun. I loved peeking behind the curtain and getting to know a little bit more about this. I honestly will probably release this episode tomorrow.
Okay.
Just to kind of get people still excited about the 500 and hear the reasonings behind everything. And then also kind of get people excited for the 150 next month. So you gotta tell the people where they can find you, what else you're doing. You gotta plug yourself, girl.
I mean, I've been mainly doing PWI stuff, although I think you know about this. I'm starting a committee of women to do a women's 500 because it can be done, and I actually had to leave people off last year too. So that's gonna be towards the end of the year. There's also really cool collaborations. I can't really give details about it, happening at the end of the year with PWI and certain promotions, so look out for that. And certain stream shows, so that'll be really cool. There's a lot of collabs. That's like my new job that I took on. Find me at Kristen Ashly on Twitter. Right now we're having a contest for the women's 150. If you can guess all top 5 in a row, correct order, and then you like and share the tweet, then we'll put you in a drawing for some cool prizes. So look for that too. It's pinned to my Twitter. Yeah.
Listen, I saw that tweet. I was like, I don't know like any Japanese wrestler, so I know I can't even do this because I know I'm gonna be wrong. I was about to just like copy and paste somebody else's answer and just switch a few around.
Kevin was like, what if nobody gets it? Because it's not easy.
No.
I said, well, then we'll just take everybody who replies and we'll just use that. Somebody will win. It just depends.
Even if, like, so say they don't get it in the exact order, but say they get, like, everybody. You could always do it like that, too.
Yeah, but then I think if nobody gets it, then we'll just throw everyone in. That way we're not being unfair. We'll just throw everyone in and they can.
All right, cool. So I'll reply, and I need to know when to get it.
Yeah, go reply, and then you'll be thrown in. Because I'm looking at the replies and I'm like, I don't know. Will we get one that's right? Like, no. I don't want to say that they're all wrong, but it's like, maybe.
Oh, man.
I don't know. Now I'm wondering. Like, I'm not saying that any of them are right or wrong. I'm just saying I don't know. Like, now I'm wondering.
You're a tough cookie to crack, Kristen.
Yeah.
You're tough. I like it.
I want to keep my job.
I get
And I will say the women's 150 is like my baby. It's my issue, so I really don't want to lose it.
Hey, I get it. Doing like these interview things, which I will obviously need to have you on for like a full-on inside the mind of at a later date. We'll figure that out later.
Sure.
But because I want to know more about you, like outside of PWI, of course, because you're great. Right. So that's like my baby. Like inside the mind of is like my precious child that I love. Right. So I get it 100%, but you know me. I gotta just try and poke a little bit, see what I can.
Well,
get.
you wouldn't be doing your job if you didn't ask.
Exactly.
So I firmly suspect anybody that interviews me from now till then to ask, and I'm just gonna be like,
oh yeah, because you put that tweet out, and I guarantee you got responses about it. About people, like, oh yeah, like I'll talk about the 500 and the women, and
Well, yeah, there's always people who are like, tell us. And there are friends of mine, and there are ex-editors of mine who I've worked for in the past who will like, I'm gonna call you out, Rajgiri. Last year it was like, can you tell me the top? I was like, no, I can't tell you. Like, there are people who really try, and I cannot blame them for trying. They wouldn't be doing their jobs if they didn't. So.
Exactly. This is like the first time I get to like try and get like secret information. And I feel like a real interviewer now. I feel like I'm a part of this.
You are.
Yeah, thank you. I try my best. And obviously, I'll plug all my socials. You can follow me on Twitter at KatieRoss13. Link to my biotech Galthing ShElite Showcase, twitch.tv/ShElite Showcase. Typically Thursday 6 p.m. Eastern. Follow the Twitch so I can get us to affiliate. For the love of God, I got the custom URL on YouTube. I got that. I'm very proud of that. I got that within a year, before my birthday. So I was very happy. I want affiliate next. So everyone, go follow the Twitch.
Yeah.
You get to see all the shenanigans happen live. They're great. Like I said, youtube.com/ShElite Showcase. I always say watch the videos because they are way more entertaining. Like, do you see this? All the talking with the hands? You can see it all the time. That's what I do. If you don't want to watch videos, it's fine. I understand. Anchor, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts if you want to listen. And every show that I have done, ShElite, Inside the Mind of, In the Crowd, Savannah Show, New Japan Takeover, all on the channel. You can go watch everything, listen to whatever. Watch the 1 year anniversary because we just hit 1 year last week. So you guys can all do that. And again, Kristen, thank you so much for doing this. I'm so happy we got to finally work together in some capacity.
Yeah. Thanks.
I'll keep this in. You're a little better than Warren, I will say.
Yeah, that's okay. Kidding. I do not agree at all, actually.
Well, you can disagree. I agree with myself. Warren will understand.
He will probably agree. That's fine.
That's his job. Yeah. He has to agree. Yeah. He has to put you on the pedestal you deserve.
Great.
All right. Until next time. Bye-bye.